I hear footsteps above me, and my bedroom is in the basement. The house I'm renting has 4 floors. The ground floor is where the front door is. Above that is the first floor, then the second floor, and finally the third floor, which is where my bedroom is. I don't have any neighbors above me. My landlord lives on the floor below me. One night I was getting ready for bed when I started to hear footsteps above me. They sounded like someone was stomping up and down the hallway just above me. Now, this doesn't really bother me, because it's an old house and the floors aren't that well insulated, but these footsteps were very heavy. They sounded like someone with steel-toe boots was doing jumping jacks right above my ceiling. I stopped what I was doing and listened. Footsteps, then silence. Then I heard a bang, like something had been dropped. Again, it sounded like it was right above my bedroom, but it didn't seem to come from the hallway. It sounded like it was coming from inside one of the rooms. I tried to dismiss it, but I couldn't help but think it was odd. So I grabbed my phone and went into the kitchen to get a better idea of where the sound was coming from. As I stood there listening, I could hear more banging noises, like someone was moving furniture around. I couldn't tell if it was coming from above or to my left, which would be the room next to mine. Decided to go check. Before I left the kitchen, though, I noticed something strange. There was a closed door that I hadn't noticed before. It was at the far end of the kitchen, near the back door. I couldn't remember ever seeing that door before. It was like it had been boarded up from the other side, and I just hadn't noticed. Curiosity got the better of me. I walked over to the door and slowly pushed it open. It wasn't easy. It opened about 4 inches and then jammed. Whatever was on the other side of the door was putting up a fight, but I kept pushing until it was wide open. On the other side was a narrow hallway. At the end of it, I could see some stairs leading up into darkness. I hesitated for a moment, wondering what I was doing. I had no business going up there, but I couldn't help but feel a sense of morbid curiosity. Something told me I should run, but my feet seemed rooted to the spot. I just stood there, frozen in fear and uncertainty. Then I heard a voice. "Who's there?" I spun around to see where it came from, but there was nothing there. I called out, "Hello," my voice echoing strangely in the small space. I waited for a response, but there was nothing but silence. I took a deep breath and tried to calm my racing heart. I told myself it was just an old house, settling, or maybe a branch had fallen on the roof. But as I stood there in the eerie silence, I couldn't shake off the feeling that I wasn't alone. Suddenly, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and I felt a cold breeze on my skin. I turned back to the stairs and started to climb, each step creaking ominously under my weight. As I reached the top, I found myself in a small, dusty room with a single window. In the corner was a wooden chest, its surface covered in cobwebs. It looked ancient, like it had been here for centuries. And as I stared at it, I couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding. I knew, somehow I just knew that I shouldn't open it. But curiosity overwhelmed me, and I lifted the heavy lid. Inside, nestled in the dusty folds of an old blanket, was a diary. Its leather cover was worn and faded, the pages brittle with age. As I opened it, the musty scent of decaying paper filled my nostrils. The diary was filled with spidery handwriting detailing the life of a woman named Eliza, who had lived in the house in the 1800s. She wrote about her days spent tending to her garden, her evenings spent with friends, and her nights spent sleeping with one eye open, afraid of the darkness. She spoke of a darkness that had taken root in her soul, whispering to her in the dead of night, tempting her with promises of power and glory. She wrote of a growing obsession with death, a fascination with the afterlife, that only grew stronger with each passing day. She wrote of rituals performed in the attic, of sacrifices made under the cloak of darkness. Diary ended abruptly, leaving me with a sense of unease. As I read the final entry, the attic door slammed shut, plunging me into darkness. I screamed, scrambling for the door in the sudden darkness. My fingers found it, and I pulled frantically until I stumbled out into the hallway, collapsing on the floor in a panic. I raced downstairs, my heart pounding in my chest. As I burst through the front door, I could hear the sound of footsteps behind me. Heavy and deliberate, like the sound of someone stalking their prey. I didn't dare look back. I ran blindly down the street, the sound of my own ragged breathing echoing in my ears. When I finally stopped, I dared not turn around. I was paralyzed by fear, unable to move. Then, as suddenly as they began, the footsteps stopped. A silence descended, heavy and suffocating. I forced myself to turn around, my eyes wide with terror. But the street was empty. There was no one there. I looked back at the house, its dark windows like the eyes of a monster staring into my soul. I wanted to scream, to call out for help, but my throat was hoarse. All I could do was stare in disbelief as the darkness seemed to ooze out of the house, enveloping me in its icy grip. I felt a cold hand on my shoulder, and I screamed again, this time in terror. I turned, but there was no one there. The hand was gone. I don't know how long I stood there, but eventually the sun began to rise, casting its golden light over the horizon. And, as the first rays of sunlight touched the house, the darkness seemed to recede, vanishing into the shadows. I stumbled home, my mind still reeling from the events of the night before. I haven't been back to that house since. Every night, I dream of footsteps in the attic, and I wake up screaming. Now I live in a small apartment in the city. I don't have any more stories to share with you, but I hope that you enjoyed mine. If you did, please consider subscribing for more scary stories. And with that said, good night.